Fire Emblem Awakening. What a contradictory game you are. Fire Emblem Awakening is both the game that brought Fire Emblem into the mainstream and also divided the community entirely because of casual mode. But that's not the reason for today's video. Today's video is to do another challenge using said Fire Emblem Awakening. Now, the run that I'm attempting this time is a box art only run of Fire Emblem Awakening. Now, what I specifically mean by that is I'm using the North American box art to play with only characters that are displayed on the box art. So that's Chrom, Lucina, Tiki, Virion, Tharia, Sumia, Vike, Kellum, Flavia, Sayri, Frederick, and Lisa. And I am adding on Robin to that because you kind of can't play the game without using Robin. I mean, you kind of can, but it's a lot harder that way. So there are a few ground rules getting into this. They're not too complicated. The only ground rules really are no DLC, I'm not allowed to forge weapons, no reclassing units, and no spam grinding. So what I mean by that is I'm allowed to challenge the monsters that appear on the map and use Reeking boxes only if I'm stuck, meaning like I can't progress unless I gain a few more levels. Now, I don't really need to do that much, but it happens like once, I think, in the run, so I thought I'd just put that aside just as a disclaimer. This will also be my first time recording something on a 3DS game, and I don't have a 3DS capture card, so sort of bear with the footage. The problem with the footage is it's a little bit clunky. Now, the cutscenes are pretty much screwed, so I'm going to be skipping all the cutscenes and skipping the story mainly. This is more for the challenge aspect. If any other rules come across, I'll bring them up as we go along, but to be honest, I think that's it. Alright, so we go in and we create our avatar. So Robin, I called him Meteor, because, you know, of course, I made his birthday the 9th of June. Because I'm a child. His asset is magic and the flaw is luck. Luck isn't really the most important stat, so I was like, I could deal with that, and I wanted him to be strong magically, especially because he's gonna be only in that tactician role because I can't reclass him. So it's important for me to get his magic up because a lot of the other units that we get are gonna be physical based, not really magic based. The only magic based ones are like Tharia and Lissa. I'm gonna call her Tharia because I think that's the correct pronunciation, so just bear with me. But we move on to the prologue. Robin gets introduced to the shepherds, and we team up with Chrom, Lissa, and Frederick to clear through the first chapter. Now, as it's being the first chapter, it's not that difficult, and we are playing on a hard, by the way, hard classic, so yeah. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, we complete the first chapter pretty easily, or the prologue chapter pretty easily, by slapping the boss with Meteor. Next up, we move on to chapter 1, which we get a few new units. The only one of these that we can use is Virion, so we have to put Sully way away from everyone else because we can't use her. Now, I do mess up once in this chapter because I left Lissa in front of an enemy, so she died. That's gonna be a big problem for this playthrough, is protecting Lissa, like your life depends on it. And also I'm not banning pair up, so pair up is going to be very, very, very important in this run. But anyway, after the second attempt, we're able to defeat the Risen Chief and move on to chapter 2. Now chapter 2 is actually even worse than chapter 1 was, specifically because now we're getting more enemies and not really any new units. We get Vike, who joins at the very beginning, but he doesn't have his iron axe with him. So I just end up pairing him up with Chrom just for the time being, because actually it is Muriel who comes in with his axe for some weird reason. I don't know why they did that, but story stuff, right? Anyway, same thing happens in this chapter. I let Lissa in front of an enemy. I forgot to check its range, and she died. So I just redo the chapter real quick, nothing too bad, and I'm able to clear it pretty easily. I will also be using the renown rewards because it's not really too important. And if a merchant pops up on the map, I will be using them. I'm just not going to spam for money because I don't have the access to the DLC. Anyway, next chapter, chapter 3, we get 2 new units that we can use, Kellum and Sumia. Now, in my traditional runs, right, I would never use Kellum, but since we're sort of forced to use him, he's better. He ends up being better off than I thought, but we'll get to that eventually. Because, you know, having 12 defense off the start, pretty nice. Thankfully, at least, though, chapter 3 is pretty easy. No real problems in this chapter pop up. Just chipping away at the enemies very carefully. Vike is pretty strong by this point already. I've been getting a lot of training with him. He's already like level 5, which doesn't sound like much, but it's this early in the game. And I actually use Vike to kill the boss. Now, at this point onwards, the footage is going to look a little better because I figured out how to change the resolution properly. So now it doesn't look so grainy and it looks actually kind of clear. Before I jump into the next chapter, I actually go through the first Paralog because I wanted to gain a little bit of experience. Now, the purpose of the first Paralog is to give Donald a full level of experience in order for him to join you, but obviously I don't need to worry about that because he's not going to be used. So the first little bit of the chapter gave me some problems because I would leave Sumia in front of these barbarians and I would have to use Kellum to back her up, and it was just a little bit of a cluster. But I put Frederick in front with Meteor and Matt backing him up, and we were able to clear out the Paralog. Next up, I'm running into chapter 4, which is the arena fight with Marth, the masked man. This chapter wasn't too bad. I just sort of stuck to one side of the room at first and made sure all my units were grouped together, and of course I left Lissa behind everyone else. A lot of my units did get very low towards the end, but they didn't die, so that's the important thing. Ooh, now we move on to chapter 5. Now this is the first chapter that gives me a lot of trouble. I don't know why I cared, but Maribel and Rickon join you this chapter and I can't use either of them, but I kept trying to keep them alive. I don't know why, but something in me made me want to keep them alive. I kept dying. It was bad because like I would be able to clear out the enemies, but then those Wyvern Riders would mess me up at the end. And this is where I used a challenge to sort of level myself up. Actually, I used a few challenges to level myself up. It took me an extra almost 50 minutes to get back to a point where I was comfortable with trying to take on the chapter, because some of those units were really scary. But I end up teaming up Lissa with Meteor, putting Meteor on one of the tower or forts, putting Sumia and Frederick together, and just sort of going to town. I was very worried towards the end of the chapter because the boss and a few reinforcements came for Vike and Crom, who were alone, out of health, and about to die. But thank God I had a thank God it was Crom who was partnered up with Vike, because I had a vulnerary in my inventory, and that was just enough to keep me alive and for the rest of my units to come up and clean up. Chapter 8 is our first defense chapter, and this one really wasn't that difficult. I just put Crom and Meteor in the top left, and then my other units in the bottom right. We get Pan and Gaius that join us this chapter, and I will be using Gaius. He's not in the box art, but he is a thief, and I need chests open, so that's the only sort of thing I'm going to use. And I will allow him to pair up with other units if it means him not dying, just sort of out of convenience. Although it's a defense chapter, Valadar is here, and I do end up wanting to take him down, so I sort of bring Frederick, Crom, and Meteor down, and I'm able to deal with him and gain a heal staff, which is pretty nice. Now we are on the next chapter, chapter 7. I think I also accidentally just called chapter 6 chapter 8, but don't worry about it. So, chapter 7, right? Not that bad of a chapter, but we do get Cordelia, who is not a part of the box art, so we don't have to worry about her. But she does get killed by reinforcements, so but I don't care to reset just because of that. But I'm playing with fire this chapter because because this chapter is pretty much entirely Wyvern Riders. So I use Virion to try and kill some of them. However, I am playing with fire here, so I switched to Vike a lot. I have them partnered up a lot, so out of convenience. And I'm almost at a point where I'm able to promote my first unit, which is Meteor, into a Grand Tactician, I think. Grandmaster, Grand Tactician. Now we are on chapter 8, which is a nice desert chapter. We love those. This one gave me a little bit of trouble. Nothing too terrible. Just bad placement with units. It's really my fault. I left Sumia where I shouldn't have, and she got destroyed. So the chapter I pretty much used a combination of Vike, Kellum, and Frederick, really, to deal with a lot of these enemies. And then there were a couple of Dark Mages, so I used whatever units were not going to get destroyed by them to attack them. So pretty much just Frederick at this point is the only real one that's going to be able to deal with these guys. That and Meteor. Thank God the boss doesn't move, so I'm able to really deal with him pretty easily. And I promote Meteor into that Grandmaster class now. Next up is Chapter 9, where we get Thoria, who we have to recruit. So you have to talk to her with Crom, so just be careful not to kill her, which almost happened for me. But this chapter did also give me a bit of trouble. There were some reinforcement Wyvern Riders from the north that caught me off guard on the first attempt, but on the second attempt things went by a lot smoother. I used those forts in the south a lot in order to cover my weaker units, and I pretty much just used Meteor, because Meteor's promoted at this point to destroy everything else. It's just I don't have enough units to kill everything. That's my problem. Is like I have strong units, but everyone's just... There's not enough units to protect Lissa is essentially what's happening, and that's why I died. The boss himself, though, got one shot by Thoria, who's going to be a force to be reckoned with later on. We move on to Chapter 10, which I wouldn't say... Chapter 10 was not difficult by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. There were a lot of units, sure, but none of them were really that scary. Besides from a couple of those Wyvern Riders who almost got Sumia down. I really am playing with fire way too much with Sumia. She's pretty strong, but she's just way too fragile. Now, the biggest problem with me is there were a bunch of assassins or thieves throughout the chapter, and they all had pretty good items. One of them had a Seraph robe, so I wanted to get my fast units to chase them down and kill them before they left. I was able to get that Seraph robe in the end, but there are a couple of items that I was not able to collect. So I was like, it's not the end of the world. It did take me 3 attempts to do this though, but hey. Now we're on to Chapter 11, which is a very open map, and this one, I would say it gave me a decent amount of trouble, and I had to do a lot of repositioning with my units. We got Olivia in this chapter, but of course I can't use her, so I can't get her to dance for me, which really blows, but I had to replay my strategy multiple times in this map. So the boss is Gangrel, and you don't want to get in his range until you're ready, because he moves, so be careful about that. There's also a lot of mages on this chapter, and I don't have very many good units that have a lot of resistance. So it's pretty much just a, hey, let's use Meteor to try and kill everything. And then it was basically, I had Crom and Frederick teamed up on a tower, and then I had Thoria and Meteor together trying to kill as many of the strong units as I could, because a lot of my other units are just way too fragile. It took like 2 or 3 guys just to deal with one pre-promoted hero. I did actually use Thoria a decent amount. I switched to her and had her use Nosferatu, which is a very common strategy. For those of you who don't know, Nos tanking is what it's called. It's just, you grab a mage, put Nosferatu on it, because Nosferatu, if it hits, gains half of that damage in health back. So say for example I do 22 damage, I gain 11 health back. So you can pretty much go forever with that, but Nosferatu only has 20 uses. So it's a little bit of a shaky strategy. However, very slowly I chipped away with the rest of the enemies, and I'm able to clear out the chapter. Because I didn't specifically partner anyone up with Crom, Crom gets default married to Sumia this time, which I'm fine with. That's completely okay. Next, I do another Paralog. I do the second Paralog, and I promote Vike in it. Again, this Paralog's really easy, because I've got a lot of units that are strong by this point, and I did this Paralog late, essentially. The only thing is those villagers that I was supposed to protect did die, because I just don't have enough fast units at this point. But anyway, I'm able to move on to Chapter 12 after that, which is the beginning of the second arc, quote-unquote, because Gangrel's dead, so we vibin'. On this chapter, Shirsh joins your team, who is a Wyvern Rider, but can't use her, so it's kind of annoying. There are a lot of pretty powerful enemies in this starting area, so I have to do a little bit of turtling for the first half. And it gets really scary towards the end, because my units are really, really close to dying. Like Frederick got insanely close, but he barely lived, and I was so grateful I didn't have to reset. Oh, it was a really hard chapter to deal with. Actually, Kellum did a lot of work in this chapter, specifically because of his defense. There were like 1 or 2 mage classes. I think they had a couple of Dark Knights, but besides that, a lot of them were physical based enemies. There's a lot of promoted units by this point, so if I don't start promoting the rest of my guys, I'm pretty much screwed. But that's what I started to do after this chapter, because I realized, hey, I'm kind of in a yikes position. Chapter 13. Ooh, Chapter 13's a joke. thankfully. There's a lot of forts. I mean, I do screw up once because I left Meteor in against a warrior. Easily, warriors are the scariest unit for me to deal with in this game. They have a lot of move. They're really, really powerful. So, at least they're pretty weak defensively. So, I do mess up once, but after that, we're fine. I leave Meteor to deal with the units in the north with Tharia paired up, and I use the rest of my units to clear out the south area. Slowly make my way towards the boss, knock him out, and move on to chapter 14, which drove me up a wall. A lot of these chapters are going to drive me up a wall, and this is the beginning. We have the luck chapter, as I'll call it. This chapter 14 is a defense chapter where you're trying to defend one ship from 3. So you have 3 different points of entry that the enemies can enter on. So what I do is I leave, again, Tharia and Meteor, completely deal with the left side, and I use Sumia, who I have failed once, but I promoted her on the second attempt because I wanted to give her a little bit more damage. They deal with the left side. I leave Vike, who's a warrior by this point, and Virion paired up to deal with that right side. Then I use the rest of my units to deal with the south side. I have to use our newly recruited unit, who is Lucina, quite a bit, even though she's really weak. But Kellum, again, comes into clutch. The biggest pain is those reinforcement Pegasus Knights that show up. I just have to be really careful about them. Now, there are 2 ways of doing this. You can either do that the defense way and get all of the chests. To be honest, I tried this multiple times and I just kept messing up. Like, there were too many enemies. So I just gave up and I was like, hey, I'm just going to kill the boss. The boss was a general. So I just killed him using both Meteor, Tharja, Sumia, and Frederick. But anyway, we complete that chapter and we move on to chapter 15. Chapter 15 is one where I have to go through a town and try and rescue Sayri, who is being attacked by enemies. And also, you gotta warn the villagers about the attack. Thankfully, this chapter is not a problem at all. I just take it slowly, as I normally do. I just don't want to do anything stupid. And I'm able to kill the boss pretty easily. Now, chapter 16. Oh, God. No, this stopped me from playing the game for 5 days. This was bad. Chapter 16 is easy. I think it's the hardest one out of this game. It gave me the most trouble by far. So there's the goal is to climb up a tree and defeat the enemy general Cervantes. However, a lot of problems. So now I have Sayri, who's very good. She's got a lot of avoid, so it's kind of hard for her to die. However, this is the point where Meteor soloing every map starts to fail. So I can't just be like, hey, let's send Meteor all the way to the front lines, let him kill everything. No, it doesn't work like that anymore. I have to give him some backup, or at least not let him deal with all of the flak. So it's chapter 16 was just gave me a headache. So I pair up every single unit except for Lisa, who I do not leave into any enemy's sight as I slowly advance. Luck is a very, very key thing. I have to rely on not getting hit sometimes, and that's not a good way to play. The other thing that's really annoying about this chapter is there's reinforcements that come from the south who are really strong, and then there's reinforcements that come from the sides who are really strong. After trying to calculate, like, oh, what should I do? What's the best option? So what I essentially did was, when the reinforcements showed up, or a turn before the reinforcements showed up, I paired Crom up with Vike, and Crom's promoted now, by the way, who are strong, and I gave them an elixir, concoction, whatever, left them at the south. They dealt with all of the reinforcements because they're strong enough, because Vike has a lot of health. Not good against magic units, but really good against non-magic units. I left everyone else to come up the south, or sorry, the right side of the map, all of my strong units at least, who would deal with the Pegasus Knight reinforcements that would come either side. And slowly made my way up there to Cervantes. And, oh god, not fun. Chapter 17 was bad, but it was not nearly as bad. It was more of trying to deal with those reinforcements that would show up midway through the chapter. So I would have to, again, rely on luck a little bit. So again, chapter 17, not awful, but luck-based. And from this point onwards, everyone's getting paired up. So just be warned for that. Also, another fun thing that happened in this chapter was my footage started to die on me for some weird reason. I guess I hit a button and everything just went to like 5% speed. So that was fun trying to deal with. But I fixed the problem, thankfully. It wasn't that bad. And then now I'm on chapter 18, which Oh, this is beautiful. This did not give me any trouble. Like, sure, a lot of my units got low on health, and there's a system of fire that pops up on the ground, lava tiles that deal 10 damage to each unit. Now, I end up giving Lissa just a couple of healing items just because she was close to dying, but thankfully the chapter wasn't that bad. I was able to deal with Yenfei pretty easily. Now I have access to one of the paralogs that you're able to get Tiki at. The footage is completely screwed on this one, so I won't even bother with it. But because everything, for some reason, the entire ground is just black. Like there's no background or anything. It's just a black floor. No idea why that happened, but missing textures. Gary's mod, funny. It's just a chapter where you gotta guard Tiki. I just do a V formation around her, wait a few turns, kill everything, bam, we're done. And we get Tiki, who's going to be helpful. That is one of our last units. Now we got chapter 19, which we have to deal with Wallheart. I had a lot of problems with these chapters, but I wouldn't consider this one terribly difficult. It was mainly just planning at the beginning. Once I got started, like an engine, I would be fine. The biggest thing was I started using Tharia as a tank, which sounds kind of weird, but with the Nosferatu and with Ruin, she's able to do a lot of damage and not take too much damage. She has more defense than Meteor does, so she's pretty nice with this. It also helps that I have Sayri, who's got insane avoid. So it's just a lot of picking the right unit to attack the enemy with. I did get screwed over by Wallheart because I didn't realize he moved, so I had to reset for that. But second attempt, was able to deal with him quite easily. Actually, Tharia just blasts him with a 68% crit. Ooh, that's beautiful. Now we move on to chapter 20, which I forgot to bring Gaius along to get those treasure chests, but didn't really care in the end. Chapter 20 was probably the easiest chapter that I've dealt with so far. Enemies were pretty easy. I just did the same strategy I've been using the past few chapters, which is Lucina with my promoted General Kellum. I pair up Tiki and Vike, Crom and Frederick, and I'm just able to use them as a nice defensive wall. This time I put Sayri up with Tharia to give her that bit of extra avoid. Sumia up with Meteor, who is max level at this point, just so she can gain a little bit more experience. But to be honest, I used Meteor more than I used Sumia because I needed to clear the right side with just him. But Meteor is getting really, really bad by this point. And even Vike is starting to dip off. So I gotta find a good unit soon. Tharia and Kellum are like my two ace units right now. After this, I'm able to promote Lucina, which really doesn't do much for me, and I move on to chapter 21. Now, ooh, God, not a fun chapter. Really difficult, really annoying. It's one of those late game chapters that's just really long, and if you mess up once, you're screwed type deal. There are dark mages up the wazoo or sorcerers, whatever you want to call them, who all have Mire tomes. Now, Mire is a bolting tome, essentially. It's that long-range dark magic that can hit you from across the map. And there's like 8 of them, 4 on each side of the map that you cannot attack. I mean, I'm sure if you had a bolting tome of your own, you'd be able to attack them, but I don't have anything like that. There's also some scattered throughout the rooms. There's treasure chests. A few of them I just avoid because I literally cannot hurt them. There's also stairs where reinforcements come from. It took me, an hour and a half to beat this chapter, so it was a pretty bad one. My main method of attack was honestly, I had Tharia paired up with Meteor and used Tharia as the main attacker, and then I sort of just had Kellum defend off any of the physical units that would pop up. I tried to cover as many staircases as I could to prevent units. It was a situation of I couldn't use too many of my units. I just had to use my strongest units because Frederick is so weak by this point. He's not even worth using. I still use him, but he's like not that good. Crom hasn't gotten great either yet. Crom gets really good, but not until the very end of the game. Sayri and Tiki are still pretty good, but I can't leave everything up to them, and Sumia is still really, really frail. She is a Dark Knight or Dark Flyer. The only reason I decided to do that, and to be honest, I do regret that decision now. I wanted to give her Gale Force, but I really should have just made her into a Falcon Knight, and I would have had a lot easier time because I did not use her magic at all, and her magic stat was Cheeks. The strategy that I sort of enveloped to avoid those Mire attacks was I used a lot of Virion because Virion has the lowest, or how I partnered everyone up, had the lowest amount of resistance, and I'm fine with Virion getting attacked because he's got a lot of health and a lot of defense. Or mainly health because the defense doesn't matter. But as long as I had healing available, and the entire run sucks because I've got Lissa as the only healer the entire time. No Maribel, no Anna, no Libra, but I was able to make it to the end finally, and the boss was a joke though. Now we got chapter 22, which is Aversa and her dark something or other units. Someone will be able to tell me. They're all named units, and they all have really, really good weapons. They have legendary weapons. I don't think every single one of them has legendary weapons, but almost all of them at least will have one type. So Gungnir, Balrog, Euphil, all those sorts of... Balmog, sorry, not Balrog. But this chapter was pretty easy, thankfully. I did screw up once. My decision to split push was bad, so I ended up just pushing all to the left first, dealing with the units on the left side, then making my way over to the right side. So I had the entire force of my army attacking each side, rather than try and fight a two-front war. Now, chapter 23, right? First part of it was easy, just gotta defeat Valadar, pretty simple. Opens up the rest of my path. Chapter was scary, very scary. My units, 90% of the time, got really, really close to dying. It was scary. Like, I thought I skipped a lot of the turns because I was just terrified of seeing what was happening. We get Flavia halfway through the chapter at this point, and with sheer luck, with Sayri doing a lot of the work, which was nice because of her avoid. I also used a lot of Tharia to deal with the enemies, a lot of those generals, and I was able to actually defeat Valadar the second time. Now moving on to chapter 24. Again, not awful, but still pretty bad, as all of these late game chapters are. My strategy first time around didn't work. I just tried to move all my units to the left or to the right, didn't work. So I moved all my units up and then down, trying to sweep all the units. I used those forts a lot, and a unit that was very, very useful here was Tiki, because there were a lot of Wyvern Lords, and Wyvern Lords are weak to Manicheats, so that's really nice. Now another unit that picks up a lot in this chapter is Crom. He's starting to get up there. The Falchion's pretty nice on these Wyvern Risers too, or these Wyvern Lords. And thankfully, there were a lot of riding like units on horseback, like Great Knights. With Forest Tiles, they had very limited movement, so I was able to prepare myself a lot before I went in. Now, chapter 25, right? So I gave all of my units all of their legendary weapons because I thought it was the end, but then I forgot chapter 25 was a thing. And chapter 25 was absolutely terrifying. There were so many reinforcements. So I died a lot. And through my trials of testing, Crom has the Exalted Falchion, which is a better version of the Falchion. So I had a strategy of... Now I left Kellum partnered up with Tharia. Tharia has a lot of defense, and I wanted to give her even more defense just to make her a tanky beast. A lot of these units that we were fighting were physical ones. There were a couple of Mire users, and I had a very good strategy actually. Didn't mean to do it this way, but it was pretty good. I left Vike on the mountains in the middle. Now mountains give 2 defense, 20 avoid. My strat was not too difficult to think of, so there were a lot of reinforcements. So I, instead of trying to rush for the boss because it's a defeat commander chapter, I just very carefully dealt with the reinforcements each turn that they came out. Always making sure that Lisa was in a safe zone. I put Sumi up with Lisa just so she had more magic. More magic equals more range when I use my physics staffs. So I had Crom go right with Lucina. And then I had Meteor and Frederick go left. And then my other units would slowly follow behind. Now there were 2 forts on either side, and I pretty much just plopped each of one of them there. Now Crom couldn't really deal with the enemies, so I had to wait until Tharia was done killing the enemy reinforcements in the south before I could bring her up to help clear the right side with Crom. Meteor pretty much was able to clear out that left side by himself. However, I brought the rest of my squad, so Tiki, Sayri, all of them up on his side. Was slowly able to crunch out both sides, deal with all the reinforcements, and deal with Aversa for the last time. Now we have the final chapter, Grima, the final boss. Ooh, now this one was fun. So, Grima's gimmick, the main thing that sucks about his chapter is the amount of enemies that are with him. All level 20, all fully promoted, all got good weapons. So, but then I realized, hey, this is the last chapter. You know what that means. I can let everyone die. So who died? I think Vike, Virion, Lissa, and Sumia all sacrificed themselves. And I basically made them open up a path for me to the boss. I rushed Grima So I had all of my other units deal with the units surrounding Grima, and then I moved in the only unit that would be able to do damage. Units deal with the units surrounding Grima, and then I moved in the only unit that would be able to do damage, which was Crom, into the fray. Now, I messed up a few times. I had to reset. I pretty much was just waiting for RNG to bless me. And boy, did it bless me. Right before everything was about to fall apart, Meteor had like 9 HP left. Everyone was dying. I was able to get a crit on Grima with... I don't know why I'm talking like this. I was able to get a crit on Grima with Crom, with the Exalted Falchion. Oh yeah, also Tharia died. Let's not forget about that. Rest in peace, Tharia. And thank God that crit hit, because I would have been screwed otherwise. So Crom dealt the final blow, so Meteor was able to live. So we beat the damn game. Oh, thank God. We get to see all the fallen heroes. Actually, I don't think it says... Let me... Oh yeah, it does say, like, retired when they retired. They retire, they don't die. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this. This was a this was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I didn't realize how difficult hard mode was. I've played Maniac on this game, or Lunatic, but Lunatic is like doing math. You have to make the perfect move each turn, so it's just stupid. Hard is more fun, and you have a little bit more freedom with what you do, but it was still really difficult with just those 13 units. Really wish I had access to a few other of those units, like Shursh, and the children is really what I wanted. If I had the kids, I would have been fine. But nope, I had to deal with what I had, the cards that were given to me. So I just dealt with it. If I would have done anything differently, it would have probably been not level up the same unit so much, give my other units a little bit more love. Especially like Lucina, Virian, they could have been more helpful if they were higher leveled. So I wish I would have done that. But hindsight is 2020, and what's done is done. So overall I had a fun time doing this. It was just a lot of pain, and the layout's kind of weird, so I'm just hoping everything's all right with this. But I know I haven't posted in forever. I've been a little bit of lazy, a little bit of stuff, we'll just say. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching yet another video. My name has been Meteor Kaiser, and I'll see you in the next challenge run. But until then, as always, peace.